Hey, tonight you're not walking into a cheerful little prairie story. You're stepping into a house where every wall remembers fever, every chair remembers exhaustion, and the future is already cracked before your baby ever draws breath. Settle in. Get comfortable. Because you're about to live through the month when a nameless child arrives, breathes for less than 4 weeks, and then vanishes so completely that even his sister will grow up never knowing he existed. You were standing in a small frame house on the Dakota Prairie in the summer of 1889. Outside, the land looks wide and generous. Wheat fields, a hard blue sky, and a wind that never stops talking. Inside, the house feels smaller than it should because it has to hold too many burdens. Debt, sickness, disappointment, and a kind of silence that presses on your ribs. Your name is Laura Ingalls Wilder. You are 22 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and thinner than any doctor would like to see on a woman carrying a 10-pound child. 3 years ago, you walked into marriage with hope and a new claim and a husband who promised that hard work would turn prairie grass into prosperity. Since then, you've collected disasters the way other families collect heirlooms. First, the hailstorm of 1887, hammering your wheat into the ground until the field looked like it had been chewed. Then the winter and spring of 1888, when diphtheria slipped into your house on a breath and refused to leave. You remember the raw burn in your own throat, the way swallowing felt like dragging glass over flesh. You remember Almanzo's fever, his throat swelling, his breath rattling like someone else's deathbed in your kitchen. You remember sending your little girl Rose away so she would not choke on the same invisible poison. Her small arms reached for you while you turned your face away, because love and infection travelled on the same breath. You remember waking in the night, not sure whether the sound you heard was the wind, your husband's breathing, or your own heart trying to run out of your chest. The doctor said the word you already knew, diphtheria. Grey membranes in the throat, poison in the blood, nerves quietly burning from the inside. He could offer only rest, water, and prayer, because the antitoxin that might have helped was still years and oceans away. You survived. Almanzo survived. But survival is not the same as recovery. Months later, when the fever broke and the house stopped echoing with coughs, the poison kept working in your husband's nerves. One cold March morning he walked toward the barn, took a step, and his legs simply refused to follow his intentions. He fell into the prairie dust like a tree that had been rotting from the inside for years, and you had not noticed until it tipped. The doctor called it a stroke of paralysis. You did not need the name. You could see the verdict in the way your husband gripped your shoulder just to stand upright. From that day on, every step he took needed a cane. Every chore needed thinking twice, and the heavy work of farming slid quietly from his shoulders onto yours. Now, in the summer of 1889, that history is not past. It is your current climate. The fields outside are dry because the rains have been stingy again, and the notes on your debts might as well be written in the same ink as medical bills you never truly paid. You are living in a house you could not really afford, on land that has not forgiven you for believing in it. And in the middle of this, you are very pregnant. The baby inside you is big. Every movement feels like a shove from someone larger than your own frame was built to hold. Your back aches, your ankles swell, and you still lift water, cook meals, mend clothes, and steady your husband when his legs forget themselves. You do not talk much about hope anymore. You talk about getting through each day without another disaster. You talk about paying the next bill, about keeping Rose fed, about walking to town with a spine that feels older than you are. And yet, there is a cradle in your mind. You imagine a son sometimes, a strong boy to grow into the work his father can no longer do. You do not say this aloud. On this prairie, saying a dream too loudly can sound like a challenge to the weather. Tonight, you're standing in that small house with all of this behind you, and all of this still not finished. And your body is about to add one more fragile life to the balance. Somewhere in the future, people will read your books and never meet him. But tonight, he is real, and the story is not over yet. It is July 1889, and the air in Dakota Territory is the kind that turns breath into work. The days are hot and dry, the nights only a little kinder, and every window in your house stands open to trade a little privacy for a breeze. Your body is tired in a way no sleep can fix, but there is one task it still has to finish. Labour does not consult your schedule. It begins in small ways, an ache that wraps around your middle, a tightening that makes you stop in the middle of kneading dough. You lean against the table, fingers white with flour, and close your eyes until the wave passes. You have done this once before. Rose came into the world with help, metal forceps, hard hands, and pain that carved itself into your memory. This time the birth will be easier, people will later say, as if there is such a thing as an easy birth on a thin body in a small house far from a hospital. You finish the dough because bread does not care that your body has decided tonight is the night. Then you go to the small bedroom, the one where the bed takes up so much space the rest of the furniture has to apologise for existing. You lay out clean sheets, the best you have. A neighbour or midwife may come. The records do not list her name. What the old newspaper does record is this. On a Wednesday night in July, Dr. Hunter will later report the arrival of a 10-pound boy at A.J. Wilder's. On paper, it sounds simple. In this room, nothing is simple. The pains grow sharper, close together, like clock ticks that have decided to sprint. Your hands grip the edge of the mattress. Beads of sweat run down your back in slow lines. The walls hold their breath with you. You're small and the child is not. Every push feels like trying to move a boulder through a doorway built for a chair. The room shrinks to the width of your hips, the length of the bed, the pressure in your bones. Somewhere at the edge of your hearing, the wind still scrapes along the shingles, reminding you that the outside world exists. Inside, time becomes something that stretches and snaps. Long minutes of labour, broken by short cries that might be your own. You think of nothing except getting through the next breath without breaking in half. And then finally, the weight shifts. There is a flood of release, and a sound that is not the wind, not you, not Almanzo. It is a new, thin cry, high and outraged at the very idea of being born into this dry, bright world. Your son arrives large and solid, around 10 pounds by the doctor's count. For a moment, the size that made your labour so hard feels like a promise. This one is strong, you think. Hands competent from farm work and sickness, both lift him, wipe him, wrap him. You're exhausted past words, but your eyes follow him, as if your gaze could tether his life to the room. His skin is red, his fists closed, his mouth open in protest. He looks more like his father than his sister did. Someone will later remember. He looks just like Manly. The doctor comes after the main work is done. That is how distance and roads and fees arrange things out here. He checks you, checks the child, and finds nothing wrong enough to mention. No one writes down his exact words, but the silence of any warning will echo later. You should rest. Your body has laboured after years of illness, malnutrition and worry. A 10-pound infant is no small demand on a frame worn by diphtheria and drought. But there is always work waiting. The farm, the house, the accounts, the husband who can no longer lift as he once did. The baby lies beside you, wrapped tightly, breathing with little hitching sighs that sound like the smallest engine the Prairie has ever seen. You watch his chest rise and fall and count each breath as if the total, once high enough, could guarantee a future. Rose will meet him soon, toddler's curiosity meeting newborn fragility. You do not give him a name, not yet. It is not unusual here to wait to see whether an infant chooses to stay in this world before you burden him with a name to carve on a stone. On this land, graves marked baby boy and baby girl stand in rows, quiet witnesses to how often hope is temporary. Perhaps you and Almanzo simply cannot decide. Perhaps the weight of everything you have already lost makes naming feel like daring fate. So he is simply the baby, your son, a new life in a house still haunted by the fever that nearly took his father. The first hours pass in a blur of pain fading to ache, of cloth being washed, of water poured, of small adjustments to a new presence in the bed. Outside, the Prairie sleeps under a thin blanket of starlight, unaware that one more soul has been added to its count. Inside, your family is now 4, even if no ledger, no book, and no children's story will say so yet. For the moment, there is no crisis. The baby breathes. You breathe. Almanzo sits nearby, cane within reach, watching his son as if staring hard enough could keep him here. You close your eyes, thinking you will rest for just a moment. You do not know that you have exactly 27 or 28 days with him, depending on which account you read in a future you will never see. You only know that for tonight he is alive, and that has to be enough. Morning comes early on the prairie. Light seeps through thin curtains, and the first sounds you hear are not roosters or wind or the creak of a settling house, but the soft, irregular breaths of your newborn son. For a moment, you lie still and listen, counting each inhale like a small answered prayer. In these first days he seems healthy. He eats, he sleeps, he cries when the air displeases him, which is often. This is, after all, the Dakota summer of 1889, hot, dry, and full of dust that sneaks through every crack. You cradle him in your arms while sweat beads along your hairline and trickles down the back of your neck. Your own body is not in such forgiving condition. You are still recovering from the strain of childbirth, on top of the old damage of diphtheria and years of never quite enough food. Your muscles tremble sooner than they should when you lift a bucket or bend to the stove. Almanzo does what he can, but his legs and hands betray him at the worst moments. He can hold the baby, rock him, keep watch when you need to close your eyes, but he cannot hitch the team, cannot plough as he once did, cannot wrestle with the earth the way a man is supposed to if he wants his family to eat. The cane leaning by his chair is a constant reminder of both survival and limitation. Money presses on you like an extra weight in the room. The big house in town, the land, the failed crops, each has its own line in your private list of worries. You pick up sewing work, mending and stitching, hands moving in small precise motions, while your mind races ahead to bills and harvests and the cost of flour. Through all of this, the baby is there. Sometimes he lies in a corner cradle, wrapped in whatever soft cloth you can spare. Sometimes he sleeps on your chest, his breath warming the hollow of your throat. Sometimes he cries with a fierce, offended wail that almost makes you laugh, because at least one person in this house is loud about what he wants. You do not write his name in a Bible. You do not embroider it on anything. There are no christening records, no certificates that anyone has yet found. He is present in the house, but almost absent from the page. Outside, other families on the prairie bury infants whose names never make it onto stone. Baby boy, baby girl. The markers line up in quiet rows in small cemeteries, grim statistics you can walk past. It is not cruelty, it is exhaustion. When nearly 1 in 4 children dies before the age of 5, grief becomes something people carry silently, because there is too much of it to speak aloud every time. You do not know the numbers, you only know the work. Wash the linens, nurse the child, check on Rose, steady Almanzo when the ground wavers under his damaged nerves. Sleep when you can, which is not often. The baby grows through those short weeks in small, ordinary ways. His limbs relax a little, his cries change in tone. On some days his colour looks good, his movement strong, and a cautious hope stirs in you. Maybe this one will stay. And then there are days when he is fussier than usual, when his face tightens in a way you cannot quite interpret. You put it down to the heat, the air, your own tiredness that makes every sound of distress feel magnified. You have no thermometer, no monitors, no charts, only a mother's hand to test a forehead and a mother's ear to judge a cry. Later, much later, scholars and doctors will look back at the single line you will eventually write about what happens next. You will say that one day, as you were doing your own work again 3 weeks after the birth, the baby was taken with spasms, and he died so quickly the doctor was too late. They will argue over what spasms meant. Seizures, convulsions, a brain starved of oxygen weeks earlier, some hidden illness no one in 1889 could name. But in this moment, before that day comes, you do not know any of that. You only know that life has been asking too much of you for 4 years straight, and you are still saying yes. You cook, you scrub, you sew, you lift, you nurse, you watch, you wait. Rose toddles through the house, a living reminder that sometimes children do survive winters, epidemics, and poor harvests. She peers into the cradle, fascinated by the small bundle that occasionally kicks. One day she may dimly remember that she once had a brother, one day she may not. For now she only knows that there is a baby, and that adults suddenly speak more softly around him. Almanzo holds his son, and traces one finger along the small hand. Perhaps he imagines a future where this boy walks the fields beside him, sturdy where his own legs are unreliable. Perhaps he does not dare imagine anything at all. The days pass. July leans toward August. The newspapers in town print small lines that seem straightforward. A 10-pound boy has arrived at A.J. Wilder's. A little child of Mr. and Mrs. A.J. Wilder dies on a Wednesday evening. Between those two brief notices lies every breath your son will ever take. Right now, he is still here. He sleeps while the wind combs the grass outside. He stirs when you shift your arms. He has no idea that this world is dangerous, that bacteria and drought and debt are circling your family like wolves that did not get the message the story was supposed to be cheerful. You tuck the blanket more firmly around him and go back to your work. You are doing your own work again, just as your manuscript will later say. You do not know that before this month ends, you will carry this same child to a grave whose stone will refuse to write his name. For now, you only know that he is breathing, that the day is hot, that the chores are endless, and that every sound in the next room makes you pause, just for a second, to be sure it is an ordinary cry and not the beginning of something worse, and somewhere far in the future, your grown daughter will sort through records for a cemetery and discover that she once had a brother no one ever told her about. But that silence belongs to another chapter. It is 3 weeks and 6 days since the baby was born. You have survived the worst of the recovery, the worst of the heat, the worst of the exhaustion that comes from adding one more fragile life to a household already stretched too thin. You're doing your own work again. Washing, cooking, mending. The endless rotation of tasks that keep a frontier home from collapsing into chaos. The baby lies in his cradle wrapped against the August afternoon. He's bigger now, stronger. His cries more insistent when he wants something and more satisfied when he gets it. For 3 weeks you have listened to those cries, learned their language, responded to their demands. This afternoon he's been fussier than usual. Not sick, you tell yourself. Just uncomfortable in the heat. Just needing to be held more. Just being a baby who does not yet know how to settle. You rock him, nurse him, check him for fever with the back of your hand against his forehead. He feels warm, but everything feels warm in August. Almanzo's outside, moving slowly through chores his body can still manage. Rose is playing near the door, too young to understand the small shifts in a household, too innocent to sense that something is about to break. The house is ordinary, unremarkable, filled with the sounds of a Wednesday afternoon in late summer. You lay the baby down in his cradle after he finally nurses himself into calm. His eyes close, his breathing evens, and for a moment you think the fussiness has passed. You turn back to your work. There is bread to check, laundry to fold, 100 small tasks that will not wait for a mother's rest. And then the baby makes a sound, not a cry, something else. A sharp inhale, a choked noise, a wrong sound that stops your hands mid-motion. You turn. The baby is moving, but not the way babies move. His small body is jerking, limbs stiffening and releasing, muscles contracting in a rhythm that has nothing to do with intention. His face is turning red, then purple, his mouth open but no sound coming out. His eyes are rolled back, showing only white. You scream for Almanzo. You're already at the cradle, hands shaking, trying to pick up the baby without knowing what to do, without understanding what is happening. The spasms continue, your son's body seizing, convulsing, fighting something invisible. Almanzo stumbles through the door, cane clattering, his damaged legs moving as fast as they can. He sees the baby, sees your face, sees the truth written in the unnatural movement of his son's small frame. The doctor, he says, You send him, send someone, send anyone who can move faster than a paralyzed man to fetch help, but you already know. In your bones, in the sick drop of your stomach, in the way time has suddenly slowed and sharpened, you know. This is not something the doctor can fix. This is not something anyone can fix. You hold your son, his small body rigid and then limp and then rigid again in your arms. You speak to him, though the words are nonsense, pleas, prayers, promises you cannot keep. You rock him, as if motion could undo whatever is breaking inside him. The convulsions slow, then stop. His body goes still, heavy in a way that living things are not. You keep holding him. You press your cheek against his head, feeling the warmth that is already starting to fade. You count breaths that do not come, heartbeats you can no longer feel against your chest. Almanzo returns. The doctor is coming, he says, but his voice is hollow, because he sees the way you are holding the baby now, the way you're not moving, the way the room is filled with a silence that is louder than any scream. Your son is dead. 27 days old. Less than 4 weeks from birth to grave. No warning, no illness you could name, no chance to prepare or fight or bargain. Just a Wednesday afternoon in August, and your baby stopped breathing. The doctor will arrive too late, just as Laura's manuscript will later record. He will examine the small body, ask questions you cannot answer, offer sympathy that sounds like noise. He will write spasms on whatever paper records this death, a word that means nothing and everything. Scholars in a future you will never see will debate what killed him. Seizures, infection, birth injury, some hidden defect in a body that looked strong but was secretly fragile. They will point to his size, to your exhaustion, to Almanzo's damaged health, to the lack of medical understanding in 1889. They will construct theories and write papers and try to explain why a 10-pound baby who seemed healthy died without warning in his mother's house. But none of that matters now. Now, you're sitting in a house that feels colder than the August heat, holding a child who will never open his eyes again. Now, Almanzo is standing with his hand on your shoulder, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything except exist in the wreckage of a hope that died in minutes. Rose is crying, confused, sensing the wrongness but too young to understand death. Someone will have to explain to her that her brother is gone. Someone will have to find words for something that has no good words. But not yet. For now, you just hold him. You memorize the weight, the shape, the feeling of his small body one last time before you have to let go. Outside, the prairie is oblivious. The wind still blows, the grass still moves, the sun still sets on schedule. The world does not stop for one unnamed baby dying in a small house in Dakota territory. But your world has stopped, completely, and you do not yet know if it will ever start again. Time moves strangely after death. Minutes stretch into hours. Hours collapse into moments, and you cannot remember later which came first or how long anything took. The only thing you remember clearly is the weight leaving your arms when someone, your mother perhaps, or a neighbour, finally takes the baby's body from you. There are tasks, even in grief. Especially in grief, the frontier does not grant the luxury of stillness. A body in August heat does not wait for morning to be convenient. The baby must be washed, dressed, prepared. You do this, or someone does it for you. The memory is blurred. Your hands moving through motions while your mind is somewhere else entirely. You dress him in the one good outfit you'd saved, the small clothes you stitched while pregnant, imagining a future where he would grow out of them. He looks smaller now, in death, than he did in life. His face is peaceful, no longer twisted by convulsions, and for a moment you can almost believe he is only sleeping. But his skin is too pale, his chest too still, and the wrongness of his stillness fills the room like smoke. Someone has sent word to the carpenter. There will need to be a coffin, small enough for a baby, plain because money is scarce and grief does not change the ledger. You do not remember who ordered it, who paid for it, who made the arrangements. You only know that, by evening, there is a box. Almanzo has been silent for hours. He sits in his chair, the one he falls into when his legs give out, and stares at nothing. His hands rest on his cane, knuckles white, as if gripping hard enough could anchor him to something solid. You want to comfort him, want to say something, but you have no comfort to give. You are drowning yourself. Rose keeps asking where the baby is. She does not understand sleeping forever, does not grasp that gone means never coming back. You try to explain, but the words stick in your throat, and eventually you just hold her and let her cry for reasons she cannot name. Night comes. The house is full of people, neighbours, family, the small community that gathers when tragedy strikes, because isolation on the prairie is already hard enough without facing death alone. They bring food you will not eat, offer condolences that sound like wind, sit in your small rooms because presence is all they can offer. Someone asks about a funeral. You do not remember answering. You do not remember planning anything. Later, when you search your memory, there will be no record of a service, no mention in newspapers, no description in letters. Perhaps there was a brief gathering at the grave. Perhaps not. On the frontier, burying a baby is sometimes too common to require ceremony. The small coffin is closed. You do not remember who sealed it, but you remember the sound, the finality of wood on wood, the last glimpse of your son's face disappearing into darkness. Someone lifts the box, and it is so light, so impossibly light, that it feels like a mockery. A life measured in pounds, in ounces, in the terrible lightness of a coffin that one man can carry alone. You walk to the cemetery, or perhaps you ride. Memory fails here, collapsing into fragments. You remember dust, heat, the sun too bright for a day this dark. You remember Almanzo leaning heavily on his cane, his limp more pronounced when exhaustion and grief compound the damage the diphtheria left behind. Smet cemetery is small, orderly, a grid of graves on flat prairie land where the wind never stops. There are other small graves here, other stones marked baby boy or baby girl, other families who planted hope and harvested loss. You're not alone in this. You're not unique. That does not make it easier. The grave has been dug, shallow, narrow, just large enough. Someone lowers the coffin. You watch it descend into the earth, into the Dakota soil that took your wheat, your house, your health, and now your son. This territory has taken everything from you except your breath, and some days even that feels like too much to give. There are no words you remember from this moment. Perhaps a preacher spoke. Perhaps someone prayed. Perhaps there was only silence, the sound of dirt hitting wood, the finality of covering a life that barely had time to begin. You do not cry. Not here, not now. Crying is for later, for the dark hours alone, for the moments when no one is watching. Here you stand, you witness, you survive. The grave will remain unmarked for years. No name, because he was never given one. No dates, because even the exact day will blur in memory and records. Just a small plot of earth that eventually will grow grass like all the others, hiding the fact that something precious was buried here. Decades later, someone will place a stone. The inscription will read, "Baby son of A.J. Wilder." Not even your name, Laura. As if the mother who carried him, birthed him, held him as he died, and buried him is invisible. As if grief belongs only to the man, and the woman is merely the vessel. But that stone does not exist yet. Today there is only a mound of fresh dirt, a rectangle of disturbed earth, a place where hope is buried 6 feet down. You turn away. Almanzo turns away. The small group disperses, returning to their own lives, their own griefs, their own struggles. You walk back to the house that now holds 3 people instead of 4. The cradle is still there, empty. The small clothes are still folded. The entire house is a monument to a future that will not happen, and the silence, the terrible, crushing silence where a baby's cry should be, is the loudest sound you have ever heard. Tomorrow life will demand you continue. Tomorrow there will be chores, bills, survival tasks that do not pause for morning. Tomorrow you will have to pretend you are whole when a piece of you is buried in Dakota earth. But tonight, you sit in the dark and listen to the silence, and you begin to understand what it means to lose a child. August stretches into September, and the house remains too quiet. You move through the days in a fog, your body performing the necessary tasks while your mind is somewhere else, stuck in the moment before the spasms began, replaying the scene over and over, searching for the warning you missed. Rose notices the baby is gone, but she's too young to sustain grief. She asks for him once, twice, then stops asking. Children are merciful that way. Their memories are short, their capacity for moving forward unburdened by the weight adults carry. She will not remember him. She will grow up an only child, unaware for years, perhaps for her entire childhood, that she once had a brother. Almanzo does not speak of it. He returns to his chores, the ones his body will allow, moving through the days with a silence that is different from his usual quietness. This silence is thicker, heavier, the silence of a man who has lost the future he imagined. He had a son for 27 days. That son was supposed to grow strong, to walk the fields, to take over the work that paralysis stole from his father. Now that future is buried, and Almanzo has nothing to say about it. You do not speak of it either. What words exist for this? What language captures the specific cruelty of holding a healthy baby one moment and a dead one the next? The frontier has no patience for prolonged mourning. Death is common here. Babies die. Children die. Adults die from accidents. Illness. The sheer hardship of trying to survive on land that does not care whether you live or perish. Your neighbours understand, in the way people who have suffered understand. They do not ask questions. They do not expect you to talk about it. They bring food for a week, then stop because life continues and resources are finite and everyone has their own burdens. Your mother visits, stays a few days, then returns home. She has already buried one son, your brother Freddie, dead at 9 months. A decade ago. She knows this grief. She does not try to comfort you with platitudes about God's plan or heaven or time-healing wounds. She just sits with you, shares the silence, and leaves when there is nothing more to be done. The cradle remains in the corner for a few weeks. Then someone, Almanzo perhaps, or a neighbour, removes it. You do not ask where it goes. You do not want to know. The small clothes are packed away, folded into a trunk hidden from sight but never from memory. You do not visit the grave. Perhaps you should. Perhaps there is comfort in standing at the place where your son is buried. But you cannot bring yourself to go. The cemetery is too final, too real, too much a confirmation that he is gone and not coming back. Days turn into weeks. The immediate shock fades into a low, constant ache. You learn to function around it. The way you learn to function around hunger, cold, poverty, and all the other hardships this life has thrown at you. You cook, clean, care for Rose, mend clothes, manage the household. You become very good at not thinking about the baby. Except at night. At night, when the work is done and the house is dark and there is nothing to distract you, the grief returns. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene. The cry that was not a cry, the jerking limbs, the purple face, the moment when you knew, even before the doctor said anything, that your son was dying and there was nothing you could do. You wonder what you missed. Was there a sign earlier in the day, a fever you dismissed, a sound that should have alarmed you? Could the doctor have saved him if you had sent for help sooner? The rational part of your mind knows the answer. Probably not. Whatever killed him, seizures, infection, some defect no one in 1889 could diagnose, was too fast, too sudden, too beyond the reach of frontier medicine. But the irrational part, the mother part, will spend years asking those questions. Almanzo lies beside you, equally awake, equally silent. Neither of you speaks. There is an unspoken agreement between you that talking about it makes it worse, makes it real in a way that silence does not. So you lie in parallel grief, close in body but distant in the private landscapes of loss. Somewhere in this period, weeks or months later, the exact timing lost to history, a decision is made. There will be no more children. Whether this is a medical decision, an emotional one, or simply the result of a marriage too damaged by grief and hardship to sustain intimacy, No one will ever know. Rose remains an only child. The line ends with her. And the baby, he becomes a secret. Not intentionally at first. You simply do not talk about him. You do not write about him in letters. You do not mention him when people ask about your children. The silence that begins as shock becomes habit, and habit becomes permanent erasure. Years pass. Rose grows up. She does not remember the summer when she had a brother for less than a month. She does not ask about the small grave in the Smet cemetery, and you do not tell her. By the time you sit down to write your books, decades later when Rose is an adult and you're an old woman, the baby is a single paragraph in an unpublished manuscript. A brief mention, a factual account with no emotion. One day when Laura was doing her own work again, the baby was taken with spasms and died so quickly that the doctor was too late. That is all. £10 at birth, 27 days of life, 1 sentence in your manuscript, 0 mention in your published books. The world will read your Little House series and meet you as a child, a young woman, a new bride. They will fall in love with your adventures, your resilience, your determination. They will never know about the baby who died on a Wednesday evening in August 1889. And that silence, that deliberate protective silence, will last until Rose, as an old woman herself, stumbles across records while settling your estate. She will learn, decades after his death, that she once had a brother. She will feel the shock of discovery, the strange grief for someone she never knew, the betrayal of a secret kept her entire life. But that discovery is still far in the future. For now, you sit in a silent house in September 1889, and you begin the long, hard work of learning to live with loss. You pack away the grief the same way you pack away the small clothes, carefully, quietly, when no one can see it, and you survive. Because survival is what you do. Even when survival feels like the cruelest punishment of all. You're standing beside a hole in the ground. August 8th, 1889, Smet Cemetery. Morning. The hole is small. Too small. The sight of it makes your brain reject reality. Makes you understand that some things shouldn't exist. Small graves shouldn't exist. But here you are, staring at one. The coffin is pine. Rough. Built by Almanzo yesterday. His hands shook the entire time. The nails went in crooked. He had to pull some out and start again. Each hammer blow echoed through the silence of your rented room. Each strike a reminder. Each sound proving that this is real. That the baby lying in your arms yesterday is now wooden nails and a hole in the ground. There's no headstone, no marker, nothing to indicate that a person existed here, that a son was born, that 3 weeks of life happened. Just dirt, just prairie grass. Just empty space where a future should have been. The preacher speaks. You don't hear the words. Can't hear them. Your brain has shut down the part that processes language. Shut down the part that finds meaning in sounds. All you hear is wind. Constant prairie wind. The same wind that blew through cracks in the shanty. The same wind that cooled fevered skin. The same wind that witnessed everything and cared about nothing. Almanzo stands beside you. He hasn't cried, hasn't spoken, just exists in blank space where person used to be. His face is stone, empty, the expression of man who's lost too much, who survived diphtheria and paralysis and fire and now this final thing, this thing that breaks whatever remained intact. Rose isn't here. She's too young, too innocent. Stays with neighbour while parents bury brother she barely met. Brother Hole become family secret. Brother Hole be erased so completely that 60 years from now, she won't remember he existed. Won't know until researching family graves that she had a brother at all. That her parents carried grief she never witnessed. That silence can erase person as completely as death. The coffin goes into ground. The sound it makes hitting bottom is wrong. Too light. Too hollow. The sound of 3 weeks of life becoming past tense, becoming history, becoming thing that happened instead of thing that is. You don't throw dirt, can't perform ritual that makes this permanent. That acknowledges burial, that admits the baby who nursed 3 days ago is now underground, now gone. Now nothing except memory that will fade because memories fade and 3 weeks isn't enough time to create permanent imprint. Isn't enough to justify grief that feels infinite. But Almanzo throws dirt. First handful, the sound it makes hitting pine is final, is ending, is proof that some things can't be undone, can't be reversed, can't be fixed by hoping or praying or suffering enough to earn mercy from God who doesn't grant mercy, who just watches, who just allows, who just permits babies to die and parents to bury them and life to continue, as if continuance is triumph instead of punishment. Others throw dirt, neighbours, family, people whose names you'll forget, whose faces blur together, who mean well but whose presence feels intrusive, wrong. Because grief this size needs privacy, needs isolation, needs space to exist without performance, without social obligation, without pretending that condolences help, that sympathy matters, that shared sorrow divides pain instead of just multiplying witnesses to catastrophe. The hole fills, slowly, handful by handful, until pine disappears, until only dirt remains, until grave looks like ground, like nothing, like place where nothing happened, where nobody existed. Where 3 weeks of life leave no visible mark on earth that holds millions of years of death, you walk away, away from cemetery, away from grave, away from burial that makes death official, that transforms hope into history, that proves that sometimes love isn't enough, effort isn't enough, desperate prayer and suffering and sacrifice aren't enough. Sometimes babies just die, sometimes there's no reason, no cause, no explanation, just spasms, just doctor arriving too late, just ending without meaning or purpose or lesson except that frontier kills, that poverty kills, that circumstances like yours create death more reliably than life. Back in town, people offer food, offer comfort, offer words that mean nothing, that help nothing, that change nothing. You accept because refusing requires energy you don't have, requires caring about social conventions when all conventions feel absurd, when eating feels wrong, when continuing feels wrong, when existing feels like betrayal of baby who doesn't exist anymore. Almanzo disappears, into work, into silence, into whatever internal space men retreat to when grief is too large to share, too overwhelming to voice, too permanent to process. He doesn't speak about the baby, doesn't mention the 3 weeks, doesn't acknowledge that son existed, just moves forward, just continues, just survives in body while something inside dies permanently. You hold Rose, constantly, desperately. Terrified Shell stop breathing. Shell develop spasms. Shell become another small coffin, another hole in ground, another erasure. The fear is constant, irrational, overwhelming. Every cough triggers panic. Every cry sounds like death rattle. Every moment of sleep feels dangerous, like letting guard down, like inviting disaster. The first week is blur. Time becomes meaningless. Day and night merge into continuous grey existence. You eat because body requires it. Sleep because collapse forces it. Speak because Rose needs response. But none of it feels real, feels important, feels like anything except performing minimum required functions while waiting for grief to either kill you or become bearable. It never becomes bearable, just becomes normal, becomes background radiation of existence, becomes permanent weight carried silently. Because frontier women don't mourn publicly, don't display weakness, don't admit that losing unnamed baby broke something fundamental, changed something permanent, made continuing feel like sentence instead of choice. The grave remains unmarked for years, decades, no stone, no name, no dates, just dirt and grass and eventual forgetting, until 1958, 70 years later. When Rose funds memorial stones for family graves, when she learns, finally and possibly, that she had a brother, that her parents buried son they never mentioned. That family history contains erasure so complete that 60 years of silence preserved secret better than any vault. The stone reads, "Baby son of A.J. Wilder, not even your name, just Almanzo's. As if you didn't carry the baby, didn't birth him, didn't nurse him, didn't hold him while he died. Just Almanzo's son. Just 3 weeks that don't deserve name. Just loss that gets reduced to baby son, because naming might make grief too real, might make forgetting impossible. Might create permanent record of pain frontier culture demands you hide. But the silence serves purpose, protects Rose from knowledge she doesn't need, protects you from questions you can't answer, protects Almanzo from confronting failure he feels but can't articulate. The silence becomes armour, becomes survival strategy, becomes the only way to continue when continuing is all that's left. When moving forward requires forgetting, when living requires pretending that 3 weeks in August 1889 didn't fundamentally alter everything, you're sitting in the rented room, September 1889, 1 month after burial. The room is the same walls, same bed, same window looking onto same street. But everything is different, changed, marked by absence so profound that presence of things feels wrong, feels like mockery. Feels like universe continuing when universe should stop. Rose plays in corner. She's 2 years and 9 months old. Healthy, growing, talking more every day, asking questions, noticing things. She's too young to understand death, too young to grasp permanence, too young to know that baby brother is gone. That family's now 3 instead of 4. That silence-filling room is grief so large it displaces air. She asks about the baby once. Simple question. Childish curiosity. Where, baby? The question is knife, is reminder, is proof that erasure isn't complete yet, that memory lingers, that forgetting takes time. You tell her the baby went to heaven. It is lie, or truth, or wishful thinking. You don't know. Don't know if heaven exists. Don't know if 3 weeks of life qualifies for eternal peace. Don't know anything except that Rose needs answer, needs closure, needs explanation that makes sense in her 2-year-old world, where things disappear and reappear and nothing is permanent except Mum and Papa. She accepts this, moves on, returns to playing. The resilience of children is cruel, is mercy, is reminder that life continues regardless, that grief is adult burden, that innocence protects, that forgetting is easier when you never fully understood presence. Almanzo works, constantly, obsessively. He takes every job offered, carpentry, repairs, building, anything that keeps hands busy, keeps mind occupied, keeps him away from room where baby died, where failure happened, where 3 weeks of hope ended in spasms and doctor arriving too late and coffin too small to seem real. He doesn't talk about it, doesn't mention the baby, doesn't acknowledge that son existed. The silence between you grows, expands, fills space where conversation used to exist, where partnership used to function, where marriage used to be thing besides survival arrangement. You understand. Understand that men grieve differently, that frontier culture forbids male weakness, that admitting pain is admitting failure, that Almanzo's identity requires strength he doesn't have, requires providing he can't do, requires protecting family from disasters he couldn't prevent. So he works and stays silent and pretends that silence heals, that ignoring wound makes wound disappear, that moving forward erases past. But silence doesn't heal, doesn't help, doesn't create space for recovery, just creates distance, creates isolation, creates 2 people grieving alone in same room instead of grieving together. Instead of sharing burden, instead of acknowledging that loss this profound needs witnessing, needs speaking, needs existing outside internal torture chamber where memory replays endlessly, you try once. One attempt at conversation, at sharing, at breaking silence that suffocates. I miss him, you say. Simple words, true words, inadequate words for grief that has no adequate expression. Almanzo nods, says nothing. The silence returns, heavier than before. The attempt failed. The wall remains. The grief stays individual, stays isolated, stays trapped inside where it poisons everything slowly, quietly, permanently. Your body recovers, slowly. The bleeding stops. The stitches heal. The physical damage repairs itself with time and rest and basic bodily functions that continue regardless of emotional state. But the damage isn't just physical. It isn't just tears and blood loss and exhaustion. It's deeper, fundamental, the kind that doesn't heal. That becomes permanent alteration of who you are. You don't trust your body anymore. Don't trust it to carry pregnancy safely. Don't trust it to birth healthy babies. Don't trust it to sustain life when life is fragile and circumstances are impossible, and poverty creates death more reliably than survival. The fear is constant, rational, overwhelming. The understanding that creating life in these circumstances is cruelty, is gambling with stakes you can't afford to lose again. The decision forms slowly, unspoken, mutual. You and Almanzo don't discuss it, don't articulate choice. Just stop. Stop creating possibility of pregnancy. Stop risking another loss. Stop gambling when every previous bet lost. The intimacy that creates children becomes thing of past, becomes casualty of grief, becomes sacrifice made silently to prevent repetition of August 1889. Rose remains only child. Will remain only child forever. Not by plan, not by intention, but by trauma. By fear, by understanding that some gambles aren't worth taking, that love for potential child doesn't outweigh terror of losing actual child, that Rose surviving is miracle enough, that demanding more miracles is hubris, is tempting fate, is inviting disaster that's already demonstrated its power. The house burns in September, not from fire, from decision, from recognition that staying into Smet means living with ghosts, means passing cemetery, means seeing grave, means existing in geography marked by failure and loss and death. So you leave. Pack wagon, move to Spring Valley, Minnesota, move to Almanzo's parents' home, move away from Dakota territory that took everything. But geography doesn't erase memory, doesn't heal grief, doesn't create fresh start, just changes location of suffering. Just moves broken people to different place where brokenness remains unchanged, where silence still fills space between you, where grief still colours everything grey, where survival continues without resembling living. The months pass, fall becomes winter, winter becomes spring. Time moves forward with indifference, with disregard for human suffering, with complete lack of recognition that calendar changing doesn't heal wounds, doesn't reverse loss, doesn't make August 1889 less real, less permanent, less defining. You don't speak of the baby, not to Almanzo's parents, not to Rose, not to each other. The silence becomes permanent, becomes family policy, becomes survival strategy, because speaking makes it real, makes loss present, makes grief active instead of buried, and buried feels safer, feels more manageable, feels like only way to continue when continuing is mandatory, when survival is requirement, when living despite wanting to stop is what frontier women do. The grief changes you, permanently, makes you harder, colder, more realistic about life, about hope, about future. The optimism that survived 3 years of Dakota disasters dies in August 1889, dies with unnamed baby, dies with recognition that trying isn't enough, that love isn't protection, that wanting desperately doesn't prevent loss, that sometimes universe just takes, just destroys, just proves that hoping is dangerous, that attachment guarantees pain. That loving means risking loss so profound that survival afterward feels questionable, but you survive. Because survival is what you do, what you've always done, what you'll continue doing for next 68 years, through more moves, more failures, more losses, more proof that frontier life costs everything, takes everything, demands everything, and gives back survival. Just survival. Nothing more, nothing less, just continued existence, just breathing, just moving forward, just living long enough to watch everyone else die too, to bury husband 60 years later, to outlive daughter, to become oldest survivor of family that started in Wisconsin and scattered across continent chasing prosperity that never arrived, chasing hope that always died, chasing future that became past before it ever felt like present. You're in Mansfield, Missouri, 1930. You're 63 years old. Your hair is white. Your hands are scarred from 70 years of labour. Your body moves slowly, carefully, like person who learned that movement costs, that everything costs, that living is expensive in ways that have nothing to do with money. You're writing. Finally. After decades of silence, after years of newspaper columns and farm journals, you're writing your life, your childhood, your story, the books that will make you famous, that will create legacy, that will transform you from failed farmer into beloved author, into symbol of pioneer resilience, into proof that frontier life was adventure instead of torture. But you're not writing about August 1889, not writing about unnamed baby, not writing about son who lived 3 weeks and died from spasms, not writing about grave in Smet cemetery, not writing about grief that never healed, that silence that never broke, that loss that defined everything that came after even though you never mention it. The Little House books are for children, are meant to inspire, to teach, to show that hardship builds character, that suffering creates strength, that pioneer life was noble, beautiful, worth celebrating. And maybe it was. Maybe survival, despite everything, is triumph. Maybe continuing when quitting would be mercy as victory. Maybe living 68 more years after losing son proves something valuable. But children don't need to know about dead babies, don't need to read about spasms, about doctors arriving too late, about coffins so small they seem impossible, about grief so profound it silences marriage, about fear so permanent it prevents future children, about losses that never heal, that just become background radiation of existence, that colour everything forever without ever being acknowledged. So you write around it, write through it, write everything except it. The books span 1870 to 1885. Your childhood, your adolescence, your courtship, your marriage. They end with these happy golden years, with wedding, with hope, with future stretching ahead full of possibility. They don't continue to 1886, to Rose's birth, to 1888, to diphtheria, to paralysis, to 1889, to baby, to death, to fire, to decade of wandering, to Minnesota and Florida and back to Dakota and finally to Missouri, to years of failure and poverty and grinding survival that almost killed you both. That did kill parts of you, parts that never recovered, never healed, never returned. You write one more book, one final manuscript. The first 4 years, it's different, darker, more honest. It covers 1885 to 1889, the early marriage, the disasters, the suffering, the reality behind the romance. It's not for children. It's too grim, too honest, too real. You write about the baby. Finally, 1 paragraph, maybe 2, brief mention, clinical description. Laura was doing her own work again one day 3 weeks later when the baby was taken with spasms and he died so quickly that the doctor was too late. That's all. That's the sum total. 3 weeks of life reduced to single sentence. Grief that defined decades reduced to historical fact. Loss that changed everything treated as footnote. As minor disaster in sequence of disasters. As thing that happened instead of thing that mattered. You never name him. Never describe him. Never explain what spasms means. Never detail the grief. Never acknowledge that losing son 40 years ago still hurts. Still defines you. Still exists as permanent wound that never scarred over. Just healed around. Just became part of structure. Part of foundation. Part of who you are and always will be. You don't publish the first 4 years. Can't publish it. It's too dark, too honest, too revealing. Rose, your daughter, your editor, your business partner, reads it. Tells you it's not up to your usual standard. Tells you it doesn't fit the series. Tells you that readers don't want darkness, don't want failure, don't want reality of pioneer life that includes unnamed babies dying for no reason. So it stays unpublished, stays hidden. Stays manuscript in drawer while you write farm journals and letters and maintain image of Laura Ingalls Wilder, beloved author, pioneer symbol, proof that Frontier builds character instead of breaking people. You die in 1957. February 10th, 3 days after your 90th birthday. You've lived 68 years past August 1889. 68 years of carrying silence, of maintaining erasure, of pretending that 3 weeks in summer don't matter. Don't define everything. Don't explain why you never had more children, why marriage stayed fractured, why grief coloured everything grey even when life looked successful. Rose inherits your literary estate, inherits papers, inherits manuscripts, including the first 4 years. She reads it again, considers publishing, decides against it. The book stays hidden, stays silent. Stays unpublished while she manages your legacy, promotes your books, maintains your image. Rose dies in 1968, October 30th, 68 years after her brother. The brother she never knew existed, never remembered, never learned about until researching family graves for your estate, until discovering that she had a brother, that her parents' buried son they never mentioned. That family history contains gaps she never noticed, never questioned, never filled. Roger McBride inherits the literary estate, Rose's heir, your grandnephew by choice if not blood. He discovers the first 4 years, reads it, recognizes value, recognizes honesty, recognizes that darkness has place, that failure teaches, that showing pioneer hardship authentically serves readers better than sanitized mythology. He publishes it in 1971. 14 years after your death, 82 years after August 1889, the book reaches readers finally. The paragraph about the baby exists finally. The truth becomes public finally, and people read it. Read about unnamed baby. Read about spasms. Read about doctor arriving too late. Read about grief mentioned briefly and moved past quickly. Read about loss treated as historical fact instead of emotional catastrophe. Most readers don't notice, don't pause, don't recognize significance. Just read past it. Continue to house fire, to Minnesota, to Florida, to Missouri, to eventual success at Rocky Ridge Farm, to proof that persistence wins, that survival triumphs, that continuing despite everything creates legacy. But some readers notice silence, notice brevity, notice that paragraph describing baby's death is shortest in book. Notice that you never return to it, never explain it, never acknowledge it again. Notice absence, notice gap, notice that what you're not saying matters as much as what you say. And scholars notice pattern. Notice that 3 generations of Ingalls Wilder family each lost a son. Your parents lost Freddie, you lost unnamed baby. Rose lost stillborn son. 3 generations, 3 dead boys, 3 permanent losses, 3 silences. They write about it, research it, try to understand it, try to find records, try to locate grave, try to determine cause of death beyond spasms, try to make sense of tragedy that you lived through but never fully explained, never fully documented, never fully acknowledged. The grave marker still exists, the Smet Cemetery. Baby son of A. J. Wilder. Still unnamed, still brief. Still insufficient for 3 weeks of life and 68 years of grief. Still standing as testament to loss that history almost forgot. That family silence almost erased completely. That only exists in record because Rose eventually asked questions, because Roger eventually published Manuscript, because Erasure failed despite best efforts. And maybe that's the point. Maybe silence doesn't work. Maybe erasing doesn't heal. Maybe pretending that losses don't matter just creates gaps that others notice. that scholars study, that readers question. Maybe speaking grief, however briefly, however inadequately, serves memory better than perfect silence. Or maybe you're dead and don't care. Maybe 68 years of survival prove that silence works, that moving forward requires forgetting. That acknowledging pain makes pain permanent while ignoring pain makes pain manageable. Maybe you made right choice. Maybe erasure was mercy. Maybe family secrets exist for a reason, but the baby remains, in paragraph, in grave, in gap in family history, in silence that speaks loudly precisely because it's silence, in absence that defines presence, in loss that explains everything about why you wrote about childhood but not about early marriage, about hope but not about failure, about survival but not about cost of surviving. He lived 3 weeks, died nameless, got buried in unmarked grave, got reduced to single paragraph, got erased from family memory, got mentioned briefly and moved past quickly, got treated as footnote in life that became mythology, but he mattered to you, mattered to Almanzo, mattered enough to prevent more children, mattered enough to change everything, mattered enough that silence around him speaks volumes, mattered enough that 82 years later, his story, however brief, however incomplete, still gets told, still gets researched, still gets remembered. 3 weeks, August 1889, baby son of A.J. Wilder, the son nobody talks about, the loss that defined everything that came after, the silence that shaped a family, the grief that never ended, just got buried, just got hidden, just got carried quietly for 68 years until death brought its own silence, its own ending, its own peace. And maybe that's enough. Maybe survival is enough. Maybe living 68 more years despite wanting to die in August 1889 is triumph. Maybe building Rocky Ridge Farm from nothing is victory. Maybe becoming beloved author despite burying son is success. Maybe legacy matters more than tragedy. Maybe what you created matters more than what you lost. Or maybe both are true. Maybe loss and legacy coexist. Maybe grief and achievement aren't opposites. Maybe you can bury son and build empire, carry silence and create stories, live with permanent wound and still experience joy. Maybe humans are large enough to contain contradictions, complex enough to be both broken and whole, resilient enough to survive and succeed despite permanent damage. 3 weeks, 1 paragraph, 68 years of silence. And still, somehow, the story survives. Incomplete, insufficient, but surviving, like you survived, like Almanzo survived, like Rose survived, like the family survived despite loss that should have destroyed it. Survival is something. Maybe everything, maybe enough, you're standing outside. September 1889, watching your house burn. The flames are orange, bright, beautiful in the way that destruction is always beautiful when you're too numb to feel anything anymore. The heat pushes against your face, against your chest, but you don't move, can't move. Just stand there watching everything you own turn to smoke and ash and memory. Rose is beside you. She's 3 years old, too young to understand that this is disaster number 5 or 6 or 7 in 4 years of marriage. Too young to grasp that the house burning is almost relief, almost mercy, because burning house means leaving, means escape from geography marked by failure and loss and death. The fire started in the kitchen. Grease, stove, the usual culprit. You tried to stop it, through water, through blankets, through everything you could reach, but fire doesn't care about effort, doesn't respond to desperation, just grows, spreads, consumes, takes everything that didn't get taken by hail or drought or diphtheria or paralysis or death. You saved nothing, few clothes, few dishes, nothing else. The rest is gone. Furniture, tools, papers, photographs if you had any. The cradle you used for Rose, the cradle you used for the baby boy whose name you never speak. The cradle that's now ashes, now smoke, now nothing. Almanzo stands on crutches. His legs are better than March, better than April, but still not right, Still not reliable, still not capable of the heavy labour that farming requires. He watches the house burn with same blank expression he's worn since August. Since the baby. Since grief became permanent condition instead of temporary crisis. Neighbours arrive, too late to save house, too late to salvage anything. They offer condolences, offer shelter, offer everything except solution to problem that has no solution. How do you rebuild when you've lost everything? When every attempt at survival gets crushed? When universe demonstrates repeatedly that hoping is dangerous, that trying guarantees failure? You accept shelter. Stay with neighbours for 3 days. 3 days of planning. 3 days of deciding. 3 days of recognising that staying in Smet means staying in cemetery. Means passing grave every Sunday. Means existing in landscape that witnessed every disaster, every loss, every moment when trying wasn't enough. The decision comes quietly, logically, without drama or ceremony. You leave. Leave Dakota territory. Leave claim you never proved. Leave farm you never made profitable. Leave grave you can't bear to visit. Leave everything except rows in each other and the slim hope that geography change creates circumstance change. You move to Spring Valley, Minnesota, to Almanzo's parents' house. Move with nothing. Own nothing. A nothing except 2 people who failed at homesteading. Failed at farming. Failed at surviving frontier life that was supposed to build character, but only built graves. Spring Valley is small, cold, not home. You exist there in limbo, in waiting, in the strange suspension between disaster and recovery, between acknowledging failure and planning future, between grief and whatever comes after grief when grief never actually ends. Almanzo's parents are kind, patient, they provide shelter, food, space to heal. But living with in-laws at age 23 feels like regression, like admission of incompetence, like proof that you can't manage adult life independently, that you need rescue, need support, need help that frontier wives aren't supposed to need. You work where you can, sewing, cleaning, taking whatever jobs available for women with no skills except survival. The money is small, inadequate, barely enough to contribute to household expenses, barely enough to maintain dignity, barely enough to pretend you're earning keep instead of accepting charity. Almanzo works too. Light work. Work that doesn't require legs that function reliably. Carpentry when he can. Repairs. Small jobs that pay small money. The paralysis is improving. Slowly. Unreliably. Some days he walks almost normally. Some days he can barely stand. There's no pattern. No predictability. Just random distribution of good days and bad days that makes planning impossible. Rose adjusts easily. Children always adjust easily. She plays with cousins, learns new games, forgets Dakota territory, forgets the shanty, forgets the baby brother she barely knew. Her resilience is mercy, is cruelty, is reminder that life continues regardless, that children move forward while adults stay trapped in past. Winter comes, harsh, long. Minnesota cold is different from Dakota cold, wetter, heavier, the kind that seeps into bones, into joints, into places where warmth used to live. Almanzo struggles. The cold makes paralysis worse, makes movement harder, makes recovery slower. You're pregnant again, briefly. The pregnancy ends in miscarriage at 3 months. Quick, painful, private. You tell no one except Almanzo. There is no funeral, no grave, no marker, just blood and cramping and the knowledge that your body tried to create life and failed. Again. The miscarriage feels inevitable, expected. Just another loss in catalogue of losses that defines your marriage. After the miscarriage, something shifts. Some decision gets made without discussion, without articulation. You stop trying, stop risking pregnancy, stop gambling with stakes you can't afford to lose. Rose remains only child, will remain only child forever, not by planning, not by intention, but by trauma, by fear, by understanding that some risks aren't worth taking. Spring. 1890 brings decision. Almanzo needs warmer climate, needs place where cold doesn't aggravate paralysis, needs escape from Minnesota winter that makes recovery impossible. Someone suggests Florida. Warm, mild. Perfect for invalids trying to regain strength. The suggestion becomes plan. Plan becomes action. You prepare to move again. The move to Florida is desperate. Last attempt at geographical solution to medical problem. Last hope that climate change creates health change. Last gamble that somewhere, somehow, circumstances will improve. That universe will stop destroying you. Will give you chance to succeed instead of just survive. You travel to Westville, Florida. Small town, rural, poor. The journey is long, expensive, uses most of your savings. But Almanzo's health requires it. Requires warmth. Requires mild climate where paralysis might improve, where recovery might finally happen. Florida is disaster from beginning. The climate is wrong, too hot, too humid. Almanzo can't tolerate it. The heat makes him weak. Makes recovery harder instead of easier. The humidity breeds mosquitoes, disease, malaria, yellow fever, death that comes from insects instead of cold. The work is impossible. Florida farming is different. Requires different crops, different techniques, different everything. You know wheat, no corn, no Dakota crops. You don't know citrus, don't know tropical agriculture, don't know how to survive in climate that's as hostile as Dakota but in opposite ways. The people are different too. Southern, slower, speak differently, live differently. View northern transplants with suspicion, with hostility. You don't belong, don't fit. Don't understand culture or customs or unspoken rules that govern social interaction. You try desperately. Try with same determination that kept you alive in Dakota. But trying doesn't work, doesn't help. Doesn't change fundamental fact that Florida is wrong. Wrong climate, wrong crops, wrong culture, wrong everything. 1 year in Westville proves enough. 1 year of failure. 1 year of recognizing that geographical change doesn't fix structural problems, doesn't heal paralysis, doesn't erase grief, doesn't create success where only failure exists. 1 year of admitting that moving to Florida was mistake, was desperation, was last failed attempt at escape. You return to Smet, return broke, return defeated, return to cemetery and grave and geography that witnessed every disaster, return because nowhere else works, because running doesn't help, because problems follow you regardless of location. Back in Smet you rent house, work odd jobs, exist in holding pattern while trying to plan future that looks less bleak, less hopeless, less marked by continuous failure. Almanzo works when he can, still struggles with paralysis, still needs cane, still can't do heavy labour, still disabled 6 years after diphtheria that was supposed to be temporary. The next 3 years are grinding, painful, slow accumulation of small savings through hard work and deprivation. You save every penny, every nickel, every cent that doesn't go to immediate survival goes into fund for next move, for next attempt, for next hope that somewhere you can finally succeed. You're in wagon, July 1894, heading south, Missouri bound. Everything you own fits in wagon bed. Clothes, dishes, tools, few books, $100 in cash hidden in Rose's lap desk. Life reduced to what fits in wagon. Again, always, perpetually starting over with nothing. Rose is 7 years old enough to remember this move. Old enough to understand that you're leaving Dakota forever, leaving behind grave in cemetery, leaving behind decade of failure, leaving behind everything that didn't work, that never worked, that will never work. Almanzo drives. His legs work well enough now, well enough to manage horses, to handle reins, to function adequately if not perfectly. The paralysis is permanent, will never fully resolve, but he's adapted, learned to work within limitations, learned to function despite disability that defines every physical action. The journey takes weeks, slow travel, camping, living outdoors while moving from Dakota to Missouri, from failed homestead to unknown future, from known disaster to potential possibility. The trip is exhausting, hot, dusty. but forward motion feels better than staying still. Feels like progress even when it's just escape. You arrive in Mansfield, Missouri. Small town, Ozark Hills, different geography, different climate, different everything from flat Dakota Prairie. The landscape is green, rolling, full of trees and streams and vegetation that actually grows without constant irrigation. You have $100 and determination, and decade of failure that taught you everything about survival and nothing about success. You look for land, for farm, for place to finally stop running, stop escaping, stop searching for geographical solution that keeps not existing. You find 40 acres, rocky, heavily timbered, considered worthless by locals who know better than to buy land that requires clearing before planting. Land that nobody wants because nobody wants to work that hard. Land that's cheap because it's nearly impossible to farm. You buy it anyway. Use your $100 as down payment. Take out mortgage for rest. $400 total. $400 for 40 acres of rocks and trees and impossibility. $400 for last chance, last attempt, last hope. You name it Rocky Ridge Farm. Accurate name, honest name. The land is nothing but rocks and ridges, nothing but obstacles and difficulty, nothing but hard work that needs doing before farming can even begin. But it's yours, owned, mortgage notwithstanding. It's your land, your farm, your future. The first year is brutal, harder than Dakota, harder than anything. You live in wagon while building cabin. 1 room, log construction, built by Almanzo with help from neighbours, built slowly because Almanzo can't do heavy labour. Can't swing axe efficiently, can't lift logs without assistance. You help, do everything you can, cooking for work crews, hauling water, clearing brush, picking rocks, endless rocks, rocks everywhere, rocks that need removing before ploughing, before planting, before anything. You pick rocks until hands bleed, until back breaks, until body screams protest. Then pick more rocks because rocks don't remove themselves. Rose helps too. 7-year-old hands picking 7-year-old size rocks, contributing to family enterprise, learning that survival requires everyone working, everyone contributing, everyone sacrificing comfort for future possibility. The cabin finishes by winter, barely, just walls and roof and fireplace, no floor, just packed earth, no windows, just openings covered with oiled paper, no comfort, just shelter. Just walls between you and weather, just bare minimum required for survival. Winter, 1894, 1895, is test, cold, isolated, living in 1-room cabin with dirt floor and paper windows while trying to survive on minimal food and maximum hope. Rose sleeps in loft. You and Almanzo sleep near fireplace. Heat is inconsistent. Food is scarce. Life is hard in ways that make Dakota look comfortable. But you're not leaving, not running, not escaping. This is it. Final destination. Place where you either succeed or die trying. No more geographical solutions, no more hoping that moving fixes problems. This is home. This is future. This is where a decade of failure either transforms into success or proves that success was never possible. Spring comes. You plant garden, apple trees, berries. Start slow. Start small. Build gradually instead of risking everything on wheat crop that might fail. Learn from Dakota. Learn from mistakes. Learn that cautious progress beats desperate gambling. Almanzo works land. Slowly. Carefully. Within limitations that paralysis imposes. He can't plough full days. Can't do heavy lifting. Can't match work output of a healthy farmer. But he can work some. Can contribute. Can slowly, painfully, incrementally improve land that starts worthless and might eventually become valuable. You take in boarders. Travellers passing through Mansfield need lodging, need meals, need shelter. You provide it. Charge modest rates, make modest income. Every dollar helps. Every cent contributes to mortgage payment, to survival, to slow accumulation of stability. You also sew, take in laundry, Do anything that generates income. Pride disappeared years ago. Now there's just pragmatism, just recognition that survival requires doing whatever works, whatever pays, whatever keeps family fed and mortgage current. Years pass, slowly, painfully, but passing forward instead of backward. Farm improves, gradually. Cabin gets floor, gets real windows, gets additions, gets better. Not good, not comfortable, but better. Progress. Actual visible progress after decade of regression. Apple orchard grows, bearing fruit, selling fruit, generating income, small income, modest income, but income. Actual profit instead of loss. Actual success instead of failure. Actual proof that trying sometimes works. Sometimes? Rose grows up, smart girl, talented girl, wants education, wants opportunity, wants escape from farm life that broke her parents. You encourage her, support her education, sacrifice to send her to high school in town, recognize that her future shouldn't repeat your past. Almanzo ages. The paralysis never resolves, never improves beyond certain point. He walks with cane for rest of his life, works within limitations, accepts disability that diphtheria 1888 made permanent, survives, continues, functions, never fully recovers but stops expecting recovery. You age too. 30, 35, 40. Years passing, body wearing, face lining, hands scarring. The girl who left Wisconsin is gone, replaced by woman who survived everything, lost everything, rebuilt everything. Woman who looks older than years suggest. Woman whose face shows every disaster, every loss, every moment of grinding survival. But you're succeeding, finally, slowly, inadequately, but succeeding. Rocky Ridge Farm is working, producing, profiting, not wealth, not comfort, but adequacy, sufficiency, enough. After 2 decades of not enough, enough feels miraculous. 1900 arrives. New century. You're 33. Almanzo's 43. Rose is 13. You're still poor, still working, still struggling, but you're surviving. You're stable. You're proving that persistence eventually succeeds. Sometimes, eventually. After decades of failure. You're 63 years old. 1930. Sitting at desk in farmhouse that started as one-room cabin and grew into comfortable home. Rocky Ridge Farm is paid off, successful, profitable. Everything Dakota wasn't. Everything Florida couldn't be. Everything that took 36 years to build. Almanzo's 73, still alive, still walking with cane, still marked by paralysis from 1888. Still here, still married to you. 62 years of marriage. Longer than most. Longer than seemed possible in 1889 when everything collapsed. Rose is successful, writer, living in different states, different countries, making her own way, created career, created independence, created life that doesn't require farming, that doesn't require manual labour, that doesn't require survival skills that defined your existence. You're writing, finally, after decades of silence, after years of newspaper columns about farm life, after slow recognition that you have stories worth telling, worth preserving, worth sharing with a world that knows nothing about real pioneer life. You write about childhood, about Wisconsin, Kansas, Minnesota, Indian Territory, Iowa, Dakota, about moving, always moving, following Pa from place to place, chasing opportunities that never materialized, living in little houses on endless prairies. The writing is difficult, slow. You're not a natural writer, never had education, never studied literature. Just have stories, have memories, have experiences that shaped generation of Americans, have voice that speaks for millions who never got to speak. Rose helps, edits, corrects grammar, suggests changes, transforms your rough writing into polished manuscript, into books that publishers might accept, into stories that children might read. Her professional expertise makes your amateur writing publishable. The book sells. Little House in the Big Woods, 1932, your first published book at 65. First success that doesn't require physical labour. First proof that survival skills include storytelling, include preserving history, include creating legacy beyond rocks and apple trees. You write more, book after book, Little House on the Prairie, on the banks of Plum Creek, by the shores of Silver Lake, The Long Winter, Little Town on the Prairie, These Happy Golden Years. 9 books total. 9 books covering childhood from Wisconsin to marriage to Almanzo. The books succeed, sell well, generate income, generate recognition, generate legacy. You become Laura Ingalls Wilder, beloved author, pioneer symbol, proof that frontier life built character, built strength, built Americans. But you're not writing about 1886 to 1889. Not writing about first years of marriage. Not writing about diphtheria, paralysis, drought, fire, baby. Not writing about decade that nearly destroyed you. About losses that shaped everything afterward. The books are for children. Are meant to inspire, to teach, to show that hardship builds character, that persistence wins, that frontier's life was noble adventure instead of grinding survival that killed people routinely. Children don't need to know about dead babies, about paralysis, about grief that never heals, about losses that define everything, about silence that protects, that preserves, that allows continuing when speaking would break you, so you write around it, write through it, write everything except it. The books end with marriage, with hope, with future stretching ahead bright and possible. They don't continue to reality, to disaster, to decade that proved hope was dangerous. You write one more book, different book, The First 4 Years, covering 1885, 1889, the early marriage, the disasters, the suffering, the reality behind romance. It's darker, grimmer, more honest than other books. You write about the baby, finally, briefly. 1 paragraph. Laura was doing her own work again one day 3 weeks later when the baby was taken with spasms, and he died so quickly that the doctor was too late. That's all. That's everything. 3 weeks reduced to sentence. Grief reduced to historical fact. You don't name him. Don't describe spasms. Don't explain grief. Don't acknowledge that losing son 42 years ago still hurts, still matters, still defines you. Just state fact. Move forward. Finish book. You don't publish the first 4 years. Can't. It's too dark. Too honest. Rose says it's not up to standard. Says readers want inspiration, not depression. Says pioneer myth serves purpose that reality destroys. So Manuscript stays hidden, stays private, stays unpublished while you write farm columns and letters and maintain image of Laura Ingalls Wilder, whose life proves frontier builds character instead of breaking people. Almanzo dies. 1949, October the 23rd. 92 years old, 62 years of marriage, 61 years after diphtheria, 60 years after baby. He lived long life despite paralysis, despite disability, despite everything. Lived long enough to see you successful, see Rocky Ridge profitable, see survival become triumph. You continue, alone, writing letters, maintaining farm, existing in house that started as impossible dream and became reality. 90 years old, 91, 92, outliving everyone, outlasting everything. You die February 10th, 1957, 3 days after 90th birthday, 68 years after August 1889. 68 years of carrying silence, of maintaining erasure, of pretending 3 weeks don't matter, don't define everything, don't explain why. Rose inherits everything, papers, manuscripts, including the first 4 years. She reads it again, considers publishing, decides against. Book stays hidden, stays silent, stays unpublished while she manages your legacy, promotes your image, maintains myth. Rose dies 1968, 68 years after her brother she never knew, never remembered, never learned about until researching graves for your estate, until discovering family history contains gap, contains secret, contains boy who lived 3 weeks and defined 68 years. Roger McBride inherits literary estate, discovers the first 4 years, reads it, publishes it, 1971, 82 years after August 1889. The truth becomes public, the paragraph exists, the loss acknowledged. Readers discover baby, discover silence, discover that Laura Ingalls Wilder, who inspired millions, also buried son and never spoke about it. Discover that pioneer life cost everything, took everything, killed babies and disabled husbands and crushed dreams repeatedly. Some readers don't notice. Just read past paragraph about baby, continue to house fire, continue to happy ending at Rocky Ridge, continue to proof that persistence wins. But some notice silence, notice brevity, notice that grief gets 1 paragraph, while happy childhood gets 9 books. Notice what you're not saying matters more than what you say, and the grave remains de Smet Cemetery. Baby son of A.J. Wilder, still unnamed, still brief, still standing as testament to loss that history almost forgot. That family silence almost erased completely. That only exists in record because eventually, finally, someone asked questions. 3 weeks, 1 paragraph, 68 years of silence, and still the story survives. Incomplete, insufficient, but surviving. Like you survived, like Almanzo survived, like Rose survived, like Rocky Ridge Farm survived. Survival is something, maybe everything, maybe enough. The legacy isn't just books, isn't just Little House series, isn't just pioneer myth. The legacy is also survival, is persistence, is continuing despite everything, is building Rocky Ridge from nothing, is succeeding after decades of failure, is living 90 years when dying at 23 would have been easier. The legacy is complex, contradictory, both triumph and tragedy. Both inspiration and warning, both proof that persistence wins and evidence that winning costs everything, both celebration of frontier spirit and acknowledgement of frontier brutality. And somewhere in that complexity, in that contradiction, in that space between myth and reality, between published story and hidden truth, between what you said and what you didn't say, lives the real Laura Ingalls Wilder. Not pioneer symbol, not beloved author, not myth. Just woman who survived everything, lost everything, rebuilt everything, and wrote about childhood while staying silent about adulthood that almost killed her. 3 weeks, August 1889, baby son of A.J. Wilder, the loss that shaped everything, the silence that protected, the grief that never ended, just got buried, just got hidden. Just got carried quietly for 68 years until death brought peace. And maybe that's enough. Maybe survival is triumph. Maybe continuing despite wanting to quit is victory. Maybe building legacy despite burying son is success. Maybe both are true. Maybe woman can contain contradictions, can be broken and whole, can grieve and succeed, can lose everything and still win. You're gone now, dead 90 years. But stories survive, books survive, farm survives, legacy survives, grave survives, memory survives, truth survives. Even truth you tried to hide, even truth you couldn't speak, even truth that took 82 years to publish, survives. And somewhere, in some cemetery in South Dakota, small stone marks place where baby lived 3 weeks and changed everything. Changed marriage, changed future. Changed woman named Laura, who became symbol and author and legend, but started as mother who buried son and kept silent and survived, despite survival, feeling like punishment instead of gift. 3 weeks, 68 years, 90 years gone. But story remains, incomplete, insufficient, true. Finally, impossibly, permanently true. But here's what the books don't tell you, what the publishers didn't reveal, what remained hidden until decades after both women died. Those pencil-written manuscripts on dime store tablets. They didn't become beloved classics on their own. Between Laura's rough drafts and the polished books that made her famous stood another writer, a professional. a ghostwriter who transformed frontier memories into literary magic. Rose Wilder Lane, successful journalist, world traveller, best-selling novelist, spent years secretly reshaping her mother's stories, editing, rewriting, even drafting entire sections. The collaboration was so close, so contentious, so buried in lies and half-truths that scholars still debate where Laura ended and Rose began. And Rose, she denied involvement until her dying day, refused to claim credit. Let her mother take the fame while she stayed hidden behind every page, every sentence, every word that made Little House a legend. The truth about who really wrote the Little House book stayed secret for 40 years. And when it finally emerged, it changed everything we thought we knew about America's most beloved pioneer author. But that's another story, one that starts in the 1930s. One that involves typewriters and arguments and a mother-daughter partnership that created mythology, while destroying their relationship, one you need to hear.